Oh, welcome back to the Marketing Box podcast with our next entrepreneur spotlight. And I have a dear friend of mine and just an overall great guy, Jim Dotson, on the podcast today. What's up, my brother?
Hey, man. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, what you do, and you know, so they get a little picture of what's going on here.
Great. Well, I'm Jim Dotson, and I am a content creator. I'm mostly in the documentary space, TV documentary. So that's what I'm doing these days. And but really all types of video. I've done a ton of music, television, and started out doing training tapes, believe it or not, for department stores like D.H. Holmes and Schwegmans and K&B, and then somehow morphed into music television. So I was in that space for a while. And then ultimately got into the documentary game.
And so what led you? Where'd you go to? You went to high school?
Went to high school. I caught the bug in high school when we found this washing machine size not VHS, but a video machine that was in a closet.
Where were you in high school?
And I was in St. Bernard High, so it was way down in the big toe of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And we found this machine. Nobody was using it, and we started, making little tapes and recording things and so forth. So I caught the bug, probably 1977, and it was great. And this is really all I wanted to do.
It's tell stories through videos.
So, yeah, and so we then I went to Loyola because that's really where you went if you were a communication student. Mm-hmm. Wanted to be a communication student, and so went there and. It was great. Met some great people, made great contacts, and then came out the gate. I was making training tapes for D.H. Holmes. How not to do things. It's just crazy.
What training tapes for their employees?
For employees, that's really what it was. But at the and at that time was also freelancing and doing other things. Mm-hmm. So, but ultimately, a guy that was at Loyola who was an engineer. He was doing freelance stuff, got to be cameraman with some of his projects. Mm-hmm. And he would go and start doing stuff over at the Jazz Fest. And so I would be working what we call the dolly cam, the camera that slid back and forth across the stage. Mm-hmm. And I was right in front with all the bands. So everybody performing at Jazz Fest. I did that a number of years. And so that was great. I loved it. So I was able to do the corporate stuff and then able to do some, really creative stuff.
Well, you were probably privy to some pretty cool stuff in Jazz Fest, huh?
It was great, and it spoils you. You get that all access pass.
Yep.
And you just, it's hard to just go out and just be in the crowd because you get to go everywhere and really kind of see how Jazz Fest functions. And it was really mesmerizing. It was great.
Yeah. So did you always, when you picked up that video stuff, like in high school, was it always about storytelling, even from way back then, or was it what excited you about it?
No, it really, it just it was something creative. I don't know necessarily that it was storytelling, but really where I thought I would be going into Loyola would be directing college sports, having 14, 20 cameras that would be at my disposal and punching the buttons, selecting which camera that you would want to have up on the screen. That's what I thought I would do. Mm-hmm. I found out that I wasn't good at that, I just couldn't make those instant decisions to do it. But I partnered up with a guy who was very good at it, and that's one of my things I'll let people know. You don't have to be good at everything, but you need to know people who are good at something and that you want to do, and then you bring them in or you join forces to do that. So abandoned that, but got into really what's called producing. And so whether it was producing a concert or, graduated from cameraman going on to producing and, really haven't looked back. I've been in this business continuously since I started back at Loyola.
So when you produce something, it's fascinating. So that's like you're almost like the coach, right, or the owner that's saying that you're responsible for all the moving pieces and parts and all that stuff.
Right,
so
right.
That's got to be because I would imagine you've developed a process over time that equals success, right? And so, you know, how did you go about even learning that? Is it, you know, just watching what others were doing?
Yeah, well, you watching other producers as you're part of the team, whether you're the camera guy or the part of the editing crew, whatever, you're watching what they do, but then ultimately you're making that checklist yourself where you're saying, okay, well, this has to happen, that has to happen, and so forth. It's a lot of responsibility. It's, you know, a lot of nerve-wracking moments where you're, but I enjoy it. I really enjoy having the project completed as opposed to when you're in it, because there's some tense moments with that. But that's just part of it when you're, you know, in that world. So
yeah, and so you graduate from college, you go, you know, you get jobs, and then ultimately you wind up at WLAE. I think you've been there for quite a while, right?
Right. So you know, just prior to that, one of the claims to fame was we landed on a show live from the House of Blues. And so that was on TBS, really mimicking sort of like what the old Midnight Special was. I don't know if you remember that, but you'd have the Midnight Special would come on. And this was a similar show, but it was based at the House of Blues. And so my role on that was I was an associate producer, and I put together in the edit room, I wasn't the editor, but I put together the shows that would air each week. And sometimes we were right up against a deadline. The show aired on a Friday. I mean, we were editing probably that Wednesday and putting it together. So long days, a lot of stress, but that was a pivotal point in being in that process. A lot of people will say, well, you know, man, I'd love to have a network show, or I'd like to be a part of that. That looks like a lot of fun, but it's very stressful. Yeah. And the phrase that follows is "be careful what you ask for," because it's really a grueling thing to get out a network style show every week. Now I was part of a much bigger team, and I was not the coach on this. Let's be clear.
So you got to kind of watch this big operation go on, and you're by the whole time you're involved, you're watching and seeing, man, this is a lot going on.
There's a lot going on. Big budget. You know, a lot of people being part of the decisions, trying to acquire bands, trying to figure out who we're going to have on the show, and so forth. But in the end, it was about, we got to get that tape, you know, back then it was just a tape, out to TBS so that they could air it on Friday night, Saturday night. So it was great. So then that happened. We had my own business, and that went well for a while. We did our first documentary while a guy named Ron Yeager and I, who were in business together, we did that documentary. It was called Message in the Music. It was a Christian documentary, like a Christian jazz fest. So they have this festival in Pennsylvania. They have 50,000 kids, and we said, that'll make a good documentary. So we did that. It enjoyed a little airplay on some public television stations around the country. So we had that. But then the business started to taper off, and I found myself, you know, Ron and I both found ourselves at a crossroads. What are we going to do? We don't have any money. We're out of money. And basically, we were working at WLAE. They were letting us edit and have an office there. Okay. And they basically said, hey, why don't you come join forces with us? And so we did that. And I thought that would be a 2-year run. It wound up being a 25-year run. God, so you never know. Yeah. But together, working with WLAE, things really took off. And I had a solid base of funding behind me. And so that just helped out, because you can have a lot of great ideas, but without the money, it's really going nowhere.
So what do you think, you know, when you ventured off by yourself and you guys got to that kind of time when it's like, hey, we got to pivot or do something? Can you look back on it and see, do you know what went wrong? Like, where were you guys, you know, what wasn't happening that needed to happen?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was lack of sales. We had a couple of big hits, but then the phone wasn't ringing. Yeah. And I was really naive at that point, how we're going to generate business. You're thinking, you know, things just aren't going your way. Yeah. And basically, you're looking at that and you're like,
and you're in a real niche too.
It.
You guys are in a niche. You know, there's probably a limited audience. How do you reach out to them? You know, how you, I can see how that could be a challenge. You know,
but you know, sometimes I'll talk to people who are on their own and things aren't going well, and they'll just go over the proverbial cliff, let's say.
Yeah.
And you want to say, well, you know, sometimes you just need to redirect and go work for somebody else.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what we had to do. Fortunately, somebody made me an offer at the very moment I needed them to make me an offer.
Yeah.
So it was a scary time, but Ron and I looked at each other and were like, you know, we had a credit line. We could have kept going into debt to fund this operation, but we looked at it.
It just wasn't the wisest decision.
It just wasn't a wise decision. Somebody threw us a lifeline. Now, it wasn't for a whole lot of money. So it was like, okay, we'll take this. And all of a sudden, man, things just took off. It was amazing how by making that change, everything took off. And so that's something I'll frequently tell people is that you don't, you know, things aren't going well for you in this moment.
Yeah.
But one decision can then redirect you into something that's going to be positive and really what is meant to be.
Yeah, you just got to be open and willing to accept and not be closed-minded. You know, I've found that's one of the things of being an entrepreneur, man. Your mind's got to be open all the time to whatever possibility gets put in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first projects we had coming as we joined WLAE was because I had made this Christian music documentary. I had a lot of contacts in Nashville, which is really the home of country and Christian music.
Yep.
And so a guy called me who's really become a dear friend, and he said, hey, we're launching this group, Avalon. We want to do a national TV show, and because of your music experience, we want you to come do it. And so we just packed everything up. We went up to Nashville, and we recorded this concert for Avalon, and it was on PAX Television, which was a little network, but it got into all of America at that time. And so that, if I wouldn't have been with WLAE, I don't know that I could have taken on that large of a project.
I see.
But all of a sudden, everything came together, and then it was, okay, we can do this.
So once you got to WLAE, anything was possible at that point, you know, kind of within
reason. Yeah. They did not have unlimited funds, but it stabilized me at that point.
Yeah.
Because you're out there freelancing, it's, you know, job to job, check to check.
Yeah.
But I really had to, I guess, humble myself in a lot of ways, and just take things down to the basics. And no wild spending or anything like that. You just had to, like, okay, we got to grunt this out until we can start building it. Yeah.
Well, we were just talking at one of the girls' birthday just a couple of weeks ago, how this, you know, the last few years, man, has been, you know, you've been on this path with WLAE for all these years, have a ton of big wins like the Catholic League and all the stuff that you've done. But then a button has kind of switched over the last couple of years, man, where there's like a clear direction that's like you guys are rolling now.
Sure. Yeah, it's only taken, you know, about 23 years to become an overnight success, if you can even call it success.
Right.
You know, so, but, yeah, so, you know, we, in the early days of WLAE, we started latching on Cox Sports Television. So one of the things is we were doing productions for WLAE, but we were also doing productions for everybody.
Okay.
It could be the networks.
Just wherever work's coming in.
Wherever work's coming in.
So you're working on these big stories at the same time you're just doing production work.
Just guns for hire type of thing.
Yeah.
We started doing the Saints coaches show. So we had the Jim Haslett show. We had the Mike Ditka show. Those were going on little not little television stations, but television stations like, you know, Channel 8 and so forth.
Local TV.
Yeah, local TV, but about 10 different stations. So we had that going. Then we started doing, when Cox Sports Television came on board, we started doing the Hornets Coaches Show. So we were getting involved in a lot of sports and doing those kinds of things. So just a weekly half-hour show that we were doing.
Pretty easy to produce, huh?
Yeah, a lot of, well, no, it had its share of difficulty. Just you had to be on site. You had to work with the coach. You had to get everything in line. And, of course, when Katrina hit, that was a real pivotal point because the Hornets went to Oklahoma, so we had to move everything up to Oklahoma to do. So it was crazy. Shortly after Katrina, this is where things start to pivot. We go over to Tipitina's to talk about something. I can't remember what, but the people representing Fats Domino are in the next room, and they're talking about a concert that they're going to have at Tipitina's, which is going to be Fats coming out, because everybody kind of presumed he was dead because they had R.I.P., rest in peace, Fats written on his house. Okay, he was rescued by boat, taken to Baton Rouge. And so, you know, it was crazy during that time right after Katrina. Well, they're talking about a concert, and so one of the people that we were sitting, we're just waiting for this person to come back and talk to us, and he says, hey, I got Fats, you know, in the next room, or, you know, his representatives. You guys think you'd like to record that concert? And we were like, yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So right on the sidewalk, right in front of Tips, we negotiate and do a handshake deal. And Fats was known as a reluctant performer. So what the guy at Tipitina's who owned it at the time, what he says, look, I'll pay you this much money if he shows up, but I'll pay you this much money if he doesn't show up, you know. So we get everything set to record this concert, and it's Fats, and it's really telling everybody, hey, New Orleans is coming back. We're going to have this big show. It's a sold-out show at Tipitina's. So we're there. We're getting ready to record this. The only problem is that it's my 25th wedding anniversary, and I'm supposed to be in Paris at that point, okay? So here is probably the biggest project of my life, and I'm not going to be there. So I've got to get everybody in place, and then, you know, my wife and I, pray. And then my wife and I go to Paris and London to celebrate the 25th. Great deal. So I remember I'm sitting in, actually standing in the stairwell of this hotel in London, and I get a call. There's this, you know, huge time difference. And Ron's on the phone. He goes, okay, so you want the good news or the bad news? And that's never good when people tell you that, right? You know, it's
horrible.
Like, dude, just give me the bad news.
Horrible.
Just
hit I'm 8 hours away on a stairwell, dude. Just give it to me.
Just give it to me. You know, I'm dying. You know, again, it's a big, you know, it's our biggest project. And so, so I said, give me the bad news. Let's go. He goes, well, Fats gets on stage, and he plays for 4 songs, and then he leaves, and that's it. And I'm saying, oh, how are we going to make a TV show out of 4 songs? We can't do it. I said, dude, give me the good news. He said, well, Eric Paulson on Channel 4 talks Fats into getting back on stage, and he does another 20 minutes. He goes, I think, you know, we've got about 35 minutes worth of music. And so I'm just dying, you know.
So what was it supposed to be? So,
well, our intention was it was going to be a 1-hour concert, wall-to-wall music. That's it, okay? So so there I am. I get this, like, okay, well, because, again, I had this conversation with Tibbs of saying, well, I'm going to pay you this much, but no contingency if he only played 4 songs. He wound up playing about 8 or 9 songs, and it was golden. It was just a great, great moment. Turns out to be Fats Domino's last public concert. So we've got that. We didn't know it at the time, but we get it. All right, so we have that. So now we've got like 35 minutes worth of music, and we're like, okay, what are we going to do with this? We had not made, we made 1 documentary back in the, you know, the 90s.
So what year was this?
And this was 2007.
Okay.
All right, so we have this. We're like, what are we going to do with this? It's 35 minutes, and so it's like, well, what if we make a documentary out of it? And it's like, oh, man, how do you know, we know what that is, but we really haven't done but one. So anyway, we start marshaling the forces to do it, and
what does that look like? What do you?
I mean, we needed a producer, so fortunately.
So you're not producing at this point.
I'm not producing. I mean, I'm executive producing,
okay.
Which means I've got to pull a producer in.
Okay.
And so fortunately, we find that one of the guys that has been working with us, Sean O'Malley, who really left. He went and found fame and fortune over in Los Angeles, but he agreed to produce it for us. And so we have that. Now we got to figure out a way to pay him. So we're doing a lot of projects in New York for a religious group. So we're going to take that money and we're going to try to fund this, because I really don't know how to fund a documentary. At this point, I don't know.
Right.
Excuse me. So so that's where we are. All right. So so we start producing it. And it's like, okay, well, start writing it, get it all done, weaving the story in between the songs of the concert. It's like, okay, well, who we're going to get to narrate it? That, I mean, we want to try to get as big of a person as we can.
Yeah.
And so we start trying to get Brad Pitt, believe it or not, because Brad Pitt's in New Orleans doing the
that's
Make
right.
It Right film.
Yep.
So it was
Yep.
like, we're going to get Brad Pitt. He's Fats. He's going to do it. It's no problem.
Yep.
Well, Brad goes off to France, and he's trying to work it out with,
Angelina.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember when all that mess
exactly.
happened.
So it's like, okay, we're not going to get Brad Pitt. Not that, we're optimistic, of course. So then we get a lot, at this point, we're getting a lot of celebrities in, because we do these, what's called satellite feeds for networks. That's a part of our business model. So we're getting anybody who's in New Orleans and a network of
they want to broadcast
they want to get it back to the MSNBC, CNBC, all that.
Okay.
So we're doing that.
Okay.
So my rule is, listen, don't talk to the talent. Don't, just, hi, how you doing? And mic them up and leave them alone and let it go. Well, this one guy, we have John Goodman in on this particular day, and he's doing something for Disney. It's a big project. Disney needed it shot here because John lives here, and then we're going to ship it off to LA. So this guy, who's a cameraman for me, doesn't work for LAE Properties, he's a freelancer. He's just talking to John. He's just yucking it up. And I'm like, oh, no, we shouldn't do that. He's like, yeah, we're doing this Fats Domino project, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, Fats, he goes, I'd like to be a part of that. And so, one of the rules that I have, don't violate. He violates, but it turns out great because now,
he walked into a pile.
He walks in. And so, so it's like unbelievable. So, okay, now we got to make the deal with the agent. Right. And he says, well, I'm going to tell you, John normally gets, a solid 6 figures on doing this. Well, of course, that's completely
He
out
just
the question.
volunteered. We didn't ask him. He volunteered.
Like when you're talking to the agent now, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, how are we going to do this? And the agent says, look, dude, just make us an offer, okay? And it's Fats. He's going to do it. So we make him this ridiculously small offer that I'm not going to say, but it's ridiculously small. He says, all right, I'll do it. So we go, we're in the warehouse district with an audio recording place, and he walks in. In 23 minutes, he nails the script, walks out. That's it. And it's like, we're just stunned. So our first documentary coming out of WLAE is Fats Domino walking back to New Orleans, narrated by John Goodman. It's just unbelievable. You just I can't believe it. It airs in 300 markets around the United States and goes on to win a few awards. And we're just like, we're
off to the races.
We're off to the races. But again, we still don't know how to raise money for a documentary at this point.
Yep.
But we're trying to figure it out as we go along. So so that hit, and we're sitting around, okay, what's next? And so I had asked Ron, I said, really, what do you want to do? He says, well, I've always wanted to do something on the Catholic League football. Now, being at St. Bernard High, I knew nothing really of the Catholic
Explain
League.
to people what the Catholic League is.
So the Catholic League is in New Orleans, is Catholic schools, in boys' schools that it's a football league, basically, and
known as probably the top football league in the state traditionally, right?
Exactly. Really great football, and a lot of history there. And so I say, sure. I mean, I don't know anything about it, and I'm not really sure how we're going to raise money to do it. I have no idea. So so we start said, well, look, we'll do an hour-and-a-half documentary on the Catholic League from the mid-'40s all the way to present day, which at that point, I think it was 2010. Okay. So,
So that's when that project, that was the origins of that project.
That was the origins of the project. So Ron had this idea. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. So we come up and we start trying to raise money to get it. We're starting to get a few dollars to make this thing. And, again, we're faced with this idea, well, who is going to narrate this thing, because it's a big part of who's going to narrate it. And so I'm sitting at my desk one day, and all of a sudden I get a call from Jay Thomas, you know, the actor,
Yep.
and who told those great stories on Letterman and
Yep.
everything else. He's got this booming voice. He's a great comedian. And he's like, Jay, he said, Jim, he goes, I understand you're doing this project. Jay, for a short time, went to Jesuit. So he's like, I'm really interested. If I can help you in any way, you know, it'd be great. So he comes into town because he does a podcast up in Abita. And, of course, he's no longer with us. But we meet him over at the Peppermill. I meet him there. He's got this big booming voice, and he's telling all these great stories. But he agrees to do it. I'll do it. And it's for next to no money that he agrees to do it, because he has an affinity.
Yep.
Man, we had so much fun just as we were recording the voiceover, because he read a couple of lines, and then he's telling stories. And then stories like, you know, we got Tarzetti, we on the, you know, it's 4th down and 3 yards to go. It's in the mud, you know, we do this. And he says, boy, listen. And it's just, this whole thing, the way Jay tells a story is just amazing. And so we do this documentary, we get it off, and we premiere it at the New Orleans Museum of Art, okay? We got the searchlights going on out there. It's like, it's red carpet. It's a Hollywood premiere. It's all great. We have 600 people show up at this event. We're supposed to start at 6. They're there at 5:30. A lot of them, those that can wear it, have their Letterman jackets on, and they're running around in packs all around NOMA, just excited as can be that we're going to show this documentary. So we show it, we air it. It's just fantastic. And I'm like, this is what I want to do. This is all I want to do, is make these things. And that's kind of when the bug really hit. Yeah. And so so we make that, but we only cover a portion of it. You know, here we are, we're going to do an hour and a half. We're going to tell the whole story of the Catholic League, and we just couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. So it winds up becoming a 3-part series that's really, it takes us probably a decade and a half to really produce. So, wow, dude. So anyway. Well, listen,
I've talked to so many people that have watched it, dude, that, you know, I went to just so you guys know, I played at Brother Martin. Yeah. Brother Martin, there was some real iconic coaches, players that went on to do really great things out of that league. Yeah, Bobby Conlon was my coach, and they just had this, you know, it was Holy Cross, Brother Martin, Jesuit, St. Aug, you know, so Rummel. So it was all these all-boy schools, like you said, man, that just, you know, football, it's weird when you meet anybody from New Orleans, they always ask you, where'd you go to high school? Yeah. You know, so it's kind of a thing. But, dude, that had to be amazing, man. You guys must, when you're doing these documentaries, it's got to be so fascinating when you're able to sit down with these people, especially the older people, and really hear how things used to be, you know, and how things, you can see how things change, man, by going back and reliving some of the days. I would imagine it's got to be fascinating, huh?
It is, and really it's about leaving legacy. You know, it's for these people that you're doing a story on. It's leaving that legacy, telling that story, and having them see it, and that's always a great moment. And it causes me a little anxiety, because you want to make sure they enjoy it, and that they don't go, well, I don't think that was good at all. That hasn't happened to this day. Mm-hmm. But for us, after we finish a project, you know, I'll look to Ron and I say, okay, what's next? And you know, for us in that moment, it was Alan Toussaint is celebrating his 75th birthday. And so, there we go. We need to do another icon. We need to do, exactly. We need to do one on him. So that was about 2013 that we start doing that. And
do you have multiple projects going on at one time, or you got one thing, you know, or is there a pipeline?
Really, it was one big thing at a time. I mean, it's one. We finish that, then we move on to the next. That's not how it is now.
Because you have a whole pipeline now.
It's a pipeline now. It's and really, we had a big meeting yesterday, and I'm trying to figure out how we're going to get it done. But that's another story. So we do this thing on Alan Toussaint. We put that together, and that's where we win our first Emmy for doing a project. And so we're just.
And where can people find these things if they want to go watch them? Like the Alan Toussaint.
Unfortunately, because of rights issues, I can't put them on YouTube yet. We're working on that to get them on YouTube, but as soon as we can. but we'll air it on WLAE, and we have DVDs. We call them commemorative DVDs now because nobody really has them.
Right.
But soon we'll have the music stuff that will be on it. So we just kept rolling with doing different documentaries, and through that time we've done on Leah Chase. We just wrapped up one on Irma Thomas that we won another Emmy for. Jimmy Fitzmaurice. And then probably one that took probably about 7 years in the making was this project we call Battlegrounds, the Lost Community of Fazanville, which was this African-American community that was right smack in the middle of the Chalmette battlefield.
What was it called?
It was called Fazanville. That was the
Fazanville.
name. Yeah, it was a street right in the middle of it. And so, we've talked about how, good things happen and sometimes by accident and so forth. But this community was started about 175 years ago. And it was wiped out by when John F. Kennedy declared eminent domain in the mid-'60s. So you had this street that existed for 100 years right smack down the middle of the Chalmette battlefield. And all of a sudden, 1964 comes along. The park's looking to make this big celebration out of the 150th anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans, and so they got to get rid of it. So,
and what was this Fazanville, like that street? What was it symbolic of? Like, why was it there?
Pierre Fazan, who he wanted to have a place where African Americans, really people that were freed slaves, had an opportunity to buy property.
Okay.
And to be, to have a place of their own.
Okay.
So they do that, and it exists for 100 years. Eminent domain, it gets wiped out. Okay. So the story gets presented to us, and we're like, okay, this is great and all, but where are the pictures? And there are no pictures. So we can have a lot of talking heads tell the story, but without
visuals,
it's just not going to go anywhere. So we struggled with this for a long time. Park Service is looking to have a way to commemorate the anniversary of the village, as it was called. And so they have some facilitated talks where former residents who lived there as teenagers, now in their 70s, okay, and we attend that meeting. And we say, hey, we're looking to produce a documentary, and we have residents, we have some historians that are all sitting around, and the Park Service rangers are all kind of standing around, this meeting. And it's just a little impromptu facilitated talk, as they call it. So everything's going well, and I say, does anybody have any pictures?
Right, obvious question, huh?
And the park rangers start looking at each other like, and nobody's saying anything. And the residents don't have pictures because the people that moved out in 1965, Hurricane Betsy happens.
That's right.
Okay, so pictures get wiped out. Then you got Katrina. Whatever was left got wiped out from that. So we leave the meeting. There are no pictures. And we're like, okay, we'll have to see what happens here. 6 months after that, I get a knock on, not a knock, but I get the receptionist where we work. She comes to me and she says, this guy has just dropped off his disc, and it's a disc that has about 180 pictures of it on it. And it's pictures of the village. Because the one thing that I knew and was hoping for, but I knew, is that the federal government doesn't take down anything without first they take a few pictures. So we had aerial shots, we had shots on the ground, they would hold up a sign, this is house number 4. We had all of that, and I popped the disc in, and boom, there's all the pictures.
Holy
and now
moly,
we
dude.
can make the documentary. It's crazy.
Where did it come from?
And so it's somebody, to this day I don't know, but somebody in the National Park Service
must have known that they were around and said, you know what, let me do these guys a solid.
So we find we file a Freedom of Information Act,
FOIA request, yep.
And we get the pictures. They say, hey, bring your scanner down and come scan all these pictures. You're welcome to it. And I was like, hey. So now we get to produce this documentary. We released it last year, and it was just amazing. And so anyway, so you get lucky sometimes, but the thing is, you just have to, as we say, step out of the boat, try to walk on water, and see what happens, because you'll get lucky along the way.
Yeah, because there's a lot of moving pieces and parts with this stuff that you guys are doing, man. So there's probably a million different things that could come unwound.
Yeah, right now we've got probably 5 documentaries that we're trying to do. Notre Dame Seminary on Carrollton is celebrating 100 years. We're going to do one on them. The George Dunbar, the artist, 95 years old, that's coming out very soon. We got one on Frank Brightson, the chef.
Yep.
Father Harry Thompson, who was
Jesuit.
You know, that's and he's created Cafe Reconcile.
Yep.
And all these different,
an icon, dude.
An icon. It's
Yep.
just amazing. So, and then we're doing one on Wayne Warner, who is the principal of Chalmette High. He was with us on, because Chalmette was in the Catholic League for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
He was principal, but he's been principal for 50 years, and he's 80 years old. So we just started production on that. And then because we've really started getting into the art world now, we just signed a document with an agreement with the George Rodrigue Foundation. And so we're going to be, doing the Blue Dog and all
dude.
that. So right now we've got about 5 or 6 docs on our plate right now. We've got to, get that done. But as you mentioned earlier, we figured out a way how to, along the way, you start figuring things out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of my things that I say, listen, you just get in there, start creating, start doing, and ultimately along the way, you're going to figure it out.
If you run in, it sounds like you got in, you're a bull in a china cabinet, but that's normal. In the beginning, it's normal because you gotta move fast. You can't be paralyzed by analyzing everything. The only way to do it is you gotta just start running fast.
You got to do it.
And it tells you what to do as you go, because you're making mistakes along the way. And once you understand that mistakes are just mistakes and that you can pivot from them, it's like you're not afraid of them. You're looking for them.
That's right.
When that's when you're pushing good enough.
Absolutely right. You can't be paralyzed by little things. You have to say, we got to plow through it. And that is what leads me back to being at WLAE. If I was a freelance guy, you can't afford to even stop. You got to keep looking for that next job. And of course, in business, you have to stay active. But when you have someone behind you or an organization behind you, it allows you to look at things from a different perspective.
There's no doubt.
And there's a bit of a bankroll behind you. I'm not saying it's a large bankroll, but it's enough money to get you through the month, let's say.
Yeah.
As opposed to looking for, okay, where's my next, meal coming from?
And if you go out and land, just a major, listen, some of the people that you have in the pipeline are amazing, but as you guys do this, you're going to become more recognized. Having WLAE, just because if it's a huge production, man, and you get an opportunity to do something like with a worldwide star, dude, it's good to have that behind you. There's no doubt.
Yeah. It's the more you do, the more you get known for, then it's easier to get that next project. I was talking to somebody the other day that was looking to get into the business and so forth. And my thing was, man, just start creating. You just need to create content and get something going. But, the main thing is that at some point you're going to have to find out how to turn it into a product that someone's going to give you money for, or you're going to get money from some source to make this happen. Yeah. Otherwise, it becomes an expensive hobby, and that's fine if you have a way to sustain that. But basically, as you move along the way, you're going to ultimately have to figure out how to take this great idea, get it funded, and then get it in a place, whether it's on television or out in the public in some way, shape, or form. How are you going to get that to happen? So,
but it sounds like, because knowing, I think it's important what you just said, just because as you're going through things, you can look back now and see how all the things you had to go through were preparing you for what you're doing right now, right? And I think that's easy for people to forget when they're in business, man, is that, there's tough patches that you go through, but I can look back on all of the tough stuff that I went through building a business, the successes and the failures. And dude, I can see where there was a lesson in every one of those failures. Like there was something good that came out of it. I didn't know it then, but you can look back and see it now, dude. And I think that's important. I tell people you can't really cheat the process, dude. There's only one way through the process, and it includes pain.
Yeah, it's definitely an experience. But another thing I wanted to touch on is that, and I know it's just kind of trite to say it, but it is absolutely true. You have to fake it till you make it.
That's right.
And you have to be able to muster up the energy, because what I have to fight personally is this feeling like I don't belong here. I should not be here.
Confidence.
And you just, that voice is in my head, and you have to say it. So I remember when we did that first project coming out the gate with WLAE, with Avalon. So we're in Nashville. This is a big deal for the record company. Avalon is a big group for them, and they're going to spend major money for us to do it. And so I've flown up there a few times, but I fly up there on this one particular time. And just before I walk out, I leave WLAE to go to the airport. We're designing the set. We're taking an old, a Jameson bedding factory in Franklin, Tennessee, and we're going to make it into a studio. So it's not a studio. We're going to make it a studio. This place is set to become, and it is now, this huge mixed retail operation. So it's really great, awesome space in an old warehouse. But at the time, it's an empty canvas. So we had a designer on our team that's going to design out what it's going to look like. So she gives me this little card, 8.5 by 11, and it's got the fabric we're going to use and some little things, and it's got a sketch drawing of how it's going to be. So I just grabbed that, head out the door, not thinking how important that was going to be. So I get to Nashville, and I get off the plane and go immediately to, EMI Records in Nashville. And I'm sitting, and I walk in the door, and it's this huge conference room, and there's 30 people that are waiting for me to walk in the door. And I'm telling you, this is where fake it till you make it comes, because it's like, wait, I'm the guy that is going to come in here and tell you what's going on. So you got to muster that confidence, walk in there, and I had my sheet of what it was going to look like, this little drawing of what, and man, that gets passed around the room, and they're all, oh yeah, we like this. This is great. But I'm thinking, I almost came to this meeting without that. So you just think, but so that gives you confidence, and everybody in the room saying, well, Jim, how do you see this? Well, that really hadn't been asked of me before, that moment. So you're in that moment, and so that's when I'll tell people, you have to expect these moments, but then when you're in it, you have to own it. Now, I don't know how well I owned it. I didn't have the benefit of looking, above and seeing how I was doing. But you have to be ready for that, because the first thing is you're going to be filled with self-doubt. You're going to be filled with a lot of things. But what I do know is that I probably know a little bit more about what we're getting ready to do than what they know.
Exactly.
And so that's all it takes. And so I'm a big proponent of that. I've been blessed in that I've been in those moments when I'm front and center and did not expect to be, don't know how I got to that position. But then you say, okay, well,
I'm here.
Let's do it.
Yep.
That is difficult for me, was difficult for me. But it gets easier as you go. So if you're going to aspire to be that coach, be that producer, be that team leader, you've got to somehow be able to own that and work through and do it afraid. And
I would imagine you did good, because you had played the scenario over in your head a million times, probably. You've thought through. Did you know you were walking into 30 people?
I did not know I was walking into 30
people. Well, then that's
sometimes that can be a blessing.
Yeah, dude. That's tough then, man. You're up in front of an audience now. That's not just you're having a meeting. Now you have an audience.
Yeah, I do remember on that particular project that the guy that gave me the job with the record company, he went back to the days of when he was doing like concerts for ZZ Top when they were just starting out. So he's out of Texas. He's a great friend. And he woke up panic-stricken, and he said, I almost called you. It was like the night before, because he said, I used to just, a lighting package for me was like what he called a tree, which was like 4 lights on each tree, and that's it. And I'm thinking, that's all you're going to have then? I'm like, dude, we've got this elaborate lighting system. It's going to blow your mind. But it's just, there was a lot of trust on his part to give us this job.
Right.
But it was based off of what we had done with House of Blues and Jazz Fest and all these different things, that they said, well, okay, we're going to take a chance. And it turned out great. Everything went wonderful. But you get into these situations where you feel like, okay, I'm going to be inadequate. I'm not the guy that's supposed to be leading this. Mm-hmm. And you have to fight those feelings. I have to fight those feelings. Other people may say, oh, yeah, sure, I belong here. I really have to fight that feeling. That,
I think it's normal, man, just because even, you know, with real big opportunities still to this day, when you're going in and there's a lot of money on the table, you get those butterflies. I think it's normal, you know, and you just get more comfortable. The first time's helter-skelter because it's like, how did this go? But then you look across the room and everybody else is more confused than you are. So, you know, it makes you feel good. And when I got in the car business, it was interesting because I was in the car business for 1 month, and I think I sold 30 cars my first month.
Oh, wow.
And my manager brought me up and said, just so you know, to give you, because I really sold 60 cars, but every one of them was a half deal because I didn't know how to close. And he said, listen, you got to get this fixed. And just so you know, you have more experience now than anybody that you'll sit in front of. Nobody that you sit in front of will have bought 30 cars. You've been through 30
negotiations. That's a great perspective.
And I was like, shit, man. And I relaxed, and I'm like, yeah, that was like the kicking off point for me.
Yeah.
It's like once you have, I think it's interesting that you don't know it, but everything you're doing through your life is leading you up to every moment that you're in. Every big moment, every other moment, you can look back and say, shit, dude, I'm here because I should be here. This is where I'm supposed to be right now. And just realizing that. But it's, when you're going in as a first time, I would imagine now you walk into a room, you know what it feels like. You know that you're the expert in the room. You know all those things. So it probably looks a little bit different now than when you.
It looks different. It feels different. And as I'm talking to younger people, and I'll tell them, in my son and others, my two daughters, nothing can beat experience, and I can't just give you experience. Now, I can tell you what that feels like, but you're just going to have to do some stuff. I go back to this person I was talking to the other day about just starting out. I said, you're going to have to do that project, and somebody's got to pay you for it, even if it's $100 for a video, and you're going to have to experience that moment when they say, well, I don't like this, I need you to change this, and see how it feels. Because television is one of those things where it has a lot of glitz and glamour to it, but there's a lot of work and a lot of anxiety and a lot of pressure to it. Mm-hmm. And so you have to decide, you have to find out whether or not you're going to want to be in that. Because as glitzy and glamorous as it is, and everything gets resolved in a half hour or an hour, that's not the way it works. I mean, these projects take a long time. A documentary can generally take us a year. This Dunbar project that we're working on took us a solid year of working on it to get it done. Wow. So it's a lot of bumps and bruises along the way. There's a lot of money at stake. And then there's just getting the story told. So there's all these things. So what I tell people is you need to just go do it first to find out if you even like it. Forget what the money is. Just do it.
Here's the process. Go through one the whole time, and then you'll understand what am I getting myself into.
But that's not just particular to a documentary. That could be anything. Anybody you sitting here talking to, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. When somebody says, well, I think I want to go into this.
So what is the key components when you're doing this that you have to pull out? Like, is there like a set process that you've developed that has some real like specific components that you repeat in each one of them?
Yeah, I mean, first off, it starts with a great idea, and then immediately followed by that is how are we going to fund it? That's it. Where's the money on this project?
Let's talk about the funding. When you look at that, do you look at the immediate circle of influence around that person
or event, or why would somebody want to fund this? Yes. So you're looking at that. We, blessed to have great marketing people with us. Jay Sigel's on a team to help. We come out with a brochure that pretty much explains what's going on, and we set donor levels on that. So what we're doing with that brochure, and that has we've really honed in on the significance of it, because what we're doing is we're establishing what the image is on the front of the brochure. That's really going to be the movie poster. It's going to carry all the way down the line. We have that first. Then the second page, we have the narrative. So that helps us really define what the story is going to be, because we may have an idea, but we don't have a story necessarily. So we really craft that narrative. So there we have it. Then the next page is we talk about, well, who's on the project, and it's Ron and me as exec producers. We may have an additional exec producer, And then we have a producer that we're going to hire that's really responsible for conducting interviews and writing the story, crafting the story.
Do they typically work for you, Jim, or you bring freelancers?
They're freelancers and people that we've developed relationships with. Okay. Then on the back of that brochure is going to be funding levels, and it can be as high as $75,000, go all the way down to $100,000.
Okay.
And it's just different levels, and it's just basic marketing. You find those people that have an affinity for what you're doing, the person that you're doing, the subject matter.
So you're getting an address list. You're building the brochure,
yep.
Sending the brochure out, and then are y'all following up with phone calls
or emails? You're following up with phone calls. You're setting up meetings. You have contacts. While that is going on, and this is a little refinement to what we're doing, we now have a person as a freelancer who is working on grants. And so there's grant-making organizations that want to – there's money out there looking for an idea. That's the one thing that you have to know, that you have to believe, is that money is out there waiting, whether it's in the private sector or it's in a grant-making organization.
Gotcha.
Because anybody who has money of any amount is looking to put that with something that's going to be significant.
Yep.
So here we are coming in with a legacy piece. We're telling this person this story about whatever event going on. This is what we're doing. So now it's our job to find the money. Mm-hmm. And money's out there. We got to find it. So first off, you got to believe that it's out there. Because if you, and it took me a long time to believe that, because you feel like you don't want to spend money on a documentary, do you? You got to change that attitude to where's the money? It's out there.
Yep.
You got to find it. But so you have the idea, you got to quickly marry it to where's the money. So we develop that prospect list of where the money is, or where we believe the money is.
How typically big is a prospect list? Few hundred, 500?
We'd like it to be a couple hundred people. We have had it as low as 100 people.
Okay.
But what I do is I encourage people to write things down. So you sit down and you say, okay, well, we have that idea. Then you just get rid of the cell phones, lock yourself in a room and say, okay, I need you to come up with everybody you know, or you think you know, or you have contact with in some kind of way. And you can come up with a list. And that's basically what we do. Now, there's a lot of secret sauce in there. You got to start marketing. You got to start. But basically, you're talking to prospects about coming with you on this journey, funding it. Now, what really, really helps is, and this is what differentiates us, I believe, from others, but it took a while to get there, is you got to have skins on the wall.
Yep.
Because the first thing money's looking to do is to partner with somebody that's going to get them across the goal line.
It's got a track record. Yeah.
That's it. Because the landscape is littered with people, not just in the documentary world, but let's focus on that, where people, they're going to make a documentary, and they'll shoot interview after interview after interview. And they may go into 5 years, they go into 10 years. I know them. And they can't put it together. I mean, God bless them, they can't. And so now somebody may have given them money, and all they've got now is a bunch of interviews. They may have 5 years worth of interviews, and they haven't been able to put it together. So we've had to rescue a couple of those projects that have gotten in trouble, and then the money has come to us and said, hey, we need help. And so we've done that.
So you think, did they fail because, so they did the interviews, but the story, weaving the story has got to be the whole thing.
That's the tough part. That's why you got to have the next thing after the idea and the story. You got to have a great producer. You've got to have somebody that knows how to get it finished, to get it done.
What are they responsible for? Tying it together?
They're really, we sit down, we have a meeting. Where's the story going to go? Now, before we do anything, we want to know what the story arc is.
Okay.
That's a recent revelation. It's like before we go shoot, one thing, we want to know what's the arc of that story going to be.
Like, what's the objective? What are we trying to do?
What are we trying to do? And then we're going to have a few happy accidents, as we say, along the way.
Sure.
But basically, when we go to do that interview, we need to know what we're going for. We just don't want to have. I had somebody recently tell me, I'm just going to turn the camera on and talk for a couple of hours. It's like, it's a horrible situation to be in, because now an editor has to look through that 2-hour interview. Well, you multiply that by 15 people, and you're just spending days and hours looking at stuff. It's not the right way to do it. So we want story arc. So, all right, idea, money, hire a producer.
Yes,
what's the story arc? Once we get that, then we're like, okay, now we're going to hire the camera guy. We're going to go off and we're going to go assemble these interviews. Now, along the way, you're going to get a surprise. But basically, in this documentary, it's basically a series of little nuggets, little mini movies, little 3-4 minute segments that occur in that. So if you get something that you weren't prepared for, oh, I didn't know that. Okay, well, we're going to try to insert that someplace. But we have a game plan going in.
Okay.
Without that, and that's what I think hinders people. They just go off and say, well, we're just going to go shoot, and we're going to see what happens. And it's like, well, you shouldn't be doing the story if you don't really know where you're going to, or you have an idea of where you're going to land.
Mm-hmm.
So this is not, a put down of anybody who finds himself in that place. But television attracts people that say, well, that looks like fun. That looks bright and shiny. That's great. Let's go do it.
Yeah.
And then they get into it, and they say, man, I've got 100 hours worth of interview footage, and I can't.
And I don't know what to do.
Now, I'm going to tell you my Achilles heel in doing all this. I want to tell everything. I want it to be a 12-part,
series.
But you can't.
Yeah.
And so the good producers know how to pick the relevant parts of that story and weave that into something that's going to be entertaining.
Gotcha.
And hold your attention. All right, so you get the producer. We have the story arc. They're off to the races. They shoot it. Then they start putting it together with the editor. Mm-hmm. To me, one of what I call one of the secret sauces in this is that when Ron and I will sit down and look at this in its raw state before we start what we call putting B-roll images over it and so forth, we will pick it to death. We will say, is this the way we want the story to go, blah, 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 blah. All of those details, we are brutal, for lack of a better word, when it comes to that. But our producers know that. We have that conversation with them before. This is not personal. This is, we want the best that this project can be. Mm-hmm. It could be subtle things. It could be anything that we just don't feel is going to contribute to making this an entertaining story. And so,
what are some examples? Just conversations run too long-winded.
It could be the order in which things happen.
Okay.
We had something very recently where things got kind of jammed together and said, well, take that part, that needs to come down further. And you're like, you're absolutely right.
You think it's because you're producers and all? We find this happens. We're so far in the weeds.
Yeah.
You can't see the forest from the trees. We bring in somebody from the outside that comes in with a fresh look, eyes. and it's like it's obvious to them when they step back from it, but you're so far in the weeds.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it takes having the fresh eyes. It takes being able to check egos at the door.
Yep.
Because we're ego-driven business. Everybody. Now, this happened to me recently on the Fazanville project. We had a part where I'm talking about what I just mentioned to you about finding those pictures. And then all of a sudden, I say a disc, and they show me putting the disc into the computer, and then bam, full screen comes the pictures. And I thought the music should be this foreboding, ominous music. And the producer was like, nah, I don't see it that way. This is a triumphant moment. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So
yeah.
But it takes that willingness and ability to look at something and just keep looking at it until you get it right. And I like to think that is our secret sauce to doing it, because we're not afraid to do that. In the Fats Domino piece, we had we had the piece laid out pretty much, but a pivotal part in the Fats Domino, when you watch it, you'll see it, was that he got up, as I said, after 4 songs, waved goodbye to the audience, left. And Eric Paulson gets him back, as I mentioned, on the stage. We had not recorded Eric Paulson at that point. So we're thinking we're all done. And we're like, you know what? This is probably the most important part. At first we wanted to shy away and say, oh, he just did wall to wall and that was it. But we integrated that. We said, you know what?
That's good. That's great. It's a great part of the story, dude.
So we got the camera, went out, got Eric to tell that story. And to me, I get a lump in my throat about it because the way Eric tells it, because he's the guy that did it. You know, put his arm around Fats, and Fats says, well, what should I play? He says, go play Blueberry Hill. Boom, hits the note, and I'm telling you, it's magic. And I'm like, man, we almost missed that.
Damn.
So it's that willingness to look at, I call it, and we all call it, putting the clay on the wheel, and you just keep until you have something that looks like a beautiful vessel, and that's what you got to be willing to do. And
because your name's on it, dude, you're sitting there saying, listen, dude, there's no egos here.
Right.
It doesn't matter. This is the objective, is we want to get the best possible product out, and whatever that takes, it takes, man. And that's what it sounds like you guys do, which is the right way to do it, because you have this one opportunity. You're creating this piece of art that is really leaving a legacy of this great person and all the things that they did, and you have this picture in your mind and how it's going to go. It's like, dude, you're the storyteller, dude. You're the artist. And so it's good that you guys are that anal about it, man, because I would imagine, looking at it through that type of lens, nothing gets by, because, listen, everybody, all we want is it to be the best project. It doesn't matter if it's my idea, your idea, his idea. It's the fact is that,
And that moment, there's a lot of back and forth. We had something recently, I can't get into too much specific, but we disagreed on the inclusion of this one line, and it just went back and forth.
Wow.
And we finally said, no, it's not that you take a vote, but basically it's like a majority rules in that situation. And we got it done, and it turned out to be a great thing. But dancing on that wire as you do these things, because you want to make sure that you're honoring really the subject, whether it's a person or these people that lived in this village known as Fazanville. You want to honor them in that way. So that's really the basis that we come from in what we do. And I'm blessed to be in that process. I'm blessed to be in a company where I feel secure to do that. If I was a freelancer, I might be racing to the finish line a little bit faster, worrying about numbers, and it's like, I can't send that camera guy to go out and shoot Eric. That's going to cost me more money.
Yeah.
It allows me the ability to do that. So I found a spot where I could be in a company that would ultimately allow me to do that. So
yeah, dude, I look at what you're doing now, the Fats, the Fazanville, all the stuff you're doing now, and it's like, it's a building block into who knows what, just like you said, you got to get a skin on the wall. So if any young, documentarians are looking, what we do when we launch a new product and when we don't have a lot of experience is we give it away the first time, right? So it allows you to not worry. You're not taking somebody's money from something, so you can run a little faster. You can, you have a little bit more leeway. And I would recommend somebody to go through the whole process, get to the end, and do it with a family member or somebody to practice it. Probably that would be a good experience to do. And so you can really see, hey, from start to finish, this is all that's involved. Like, you can't just go shoot interviews and think you have a documentary.
Well, I would imagine in the things that you do, you're not sure how it's going to work.
No.
So you have to get it out there and get it tested and get that feedback.
When it's new, we don't know. When we have experience, now we have a predictable, and if it doesn't work, it saves us a lot of grief, because we're never out there taking money from people on a product that we don't really know how it's gonna work.
So that's an important but if you were trying to perfect that and you just kept, the feedback that you're going to get is invaluable.
That's
right?
it.
I mean, so you have to get that. And it's not that you rush it out to market, but you can't be paralyzed in that moment. And unfortunately, we see that. So when we're out making the pitch, our skins on the wall become important, because we're talking to somebody that's getting ready to give us a fair amount of money, and we're assuring them that we're going to get it done. And so that's an important, and I would tell anybody that is doing, no matter what you're doing, but particularly in the documentary space, is that when you're going out to get that money, you've got to assure them, if you have no skins on the wall, you have to assure them that you're going to get this done and that you're going to have an outlet. So we talk to people. We've partnered with people who are out there producing it, and then we become the outlet. We'll help them get money. So I'm happy to share with them, the process that we do. We had somebody recently bring us a project, and it was really about St. Aug football. It was about before the West Coast.
Okay.
A great documentary that was produced. He had it mostly done, but we came with some funding ideas, and we certainly had an outlet, for it.
Okay.
And that was, we were able to get it done. So that's another thing that I wanted to share, is that there's a lot of times where people will keep things confidential or keep things to themselves, and they don't want to share it. And what I have found is that, because you don't want anybody to steal your idea necessarily, and so what I have found is that you might be having the missing piece to somebody else's great idea. Mm-hmm. And this has happened to me over and over again, where you've got a part of the idea, they have the other part. You just don't know that these two parts need to go together. And I can't tell you how many times that happens, that I'll share it and they say, well, that's good, but what about this? And you're like, that's
what about this is what makes it.
That's what I need. So I have seen people paralyzed by, you got to sign this before I show it to you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Unless it's top secret.
Yeah.
Think about, and this is what I tell people too, this is not the last deal you're going to make. So let's get it out there. Let's get it going. Let's make it happen. And so I'm on this mission right now of just getting stuff done. We can't get to it fast enough. We have ideas coming at us left and right.
Is it a people? Is it a people issue? Because I would imagine
it's
it takes
a people
special
issue.
person to take one of these things. And
It's definitely finding the talent to be able to do this.
Where do you get the talent for this? Is it journalism students? Is it people that have been freelancing that maybe want to hook on to a bigger organization?
It's really people who have been telling stories. Journalists help because they're telling stories in 3-minute or 2-minute things on the news. So we have a couple of producers that come from news who are retired from that, and we have developed and worked with them, and now they're telling stories that are half an hour or 60 minutes in length.
Wow.
So it helps doing that. It helps having a sense of what's going on, watching Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, and just seeing what documentaries are.
Is that where you guys released it? We
haven't released anything on there. It's always been public television.
Yep.
We've thought about having Fazanville be out on Netflix, and that may happen. We just haven't done it. It's possible that the Roderick documentary goes out to a Netflix or a Hulu or one of those. We just haven't tapped into that yet.
Who's some other big who's on the short list of in the future, brother? Like they have.
Man,
and so at some point, doing this locally, you get all these skins on the wall. If you won 2 Emmys, does the phone start ringing from other places, other countries?
Well, oddly enough, this morning we got an email from Shreveport. Somebody saying,
yeah,
I saw Fazanville. We want to talk to you about it. We've talked to Ed Munez, so the whole Endymion thing.
Yeah, that would be a great story.
So you think about that and his story and creating the super crew. So we've agreed. We don't have a written contract, but we've agreed, handshake agreement, that we're going to do that.
What about Carlos? Be nice to do one on Carlos Marcello, huh?
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
I think about where the funding comes from that, but anyway.
I would imagine the funding won't be a problem on that one.
Yeah, probably not.
They'll make you an offer you can't refuse.
Exactly. That's great.
So who else you can't really talk about?
I can't. We definitely.
Who would be a dream client?
Well, man, that's a good question. I know we are looking to do one on Sybil Morial. I think she's just great. She's on our board. I've spoken to her many times, and so we're looking to get that off the ground.
I'll bet you that would be neat.
Yeah, just great. Man,
it's all locals. You have any ideas outside of here? Somebody outside of the city that you guys would like to?
Not at the moment, but I'm open to that.
Yeah.
And it's interesting as we talked. Again, this goes back to sharing the idea. So the guy that produced our Fats Domino documentary is just wildly successful in the Food Network Travel Channel space. He's just done a ton of half-hour programs. and it's great. And so he found out about we were doing Roderick, and he said, listen, I want to do that. I want to produce that. So that's great. So we're happy.
That's going to be a big one.
Yeah, that is going to be a big doc.
Because he's real recent, real kind of famous, man.
Yeah.
You know, how long ago did he die?
I think it was in 2014.
Yeah.
And so, but nobody's told his story, and so we approached them. We have, going back to last interviews, we have what we believe is his last interview. And talking to the family, they say, well, that's the last interview of that sort. I believe his wife had done some interviews with him. But as far as a commercial crew coming out, we were probably one of the last interviews.
Wow.
So we have that already recorded.
So when is that one going to launch? That's the next one?
That's, I'm thinking end of this year, beginning of next year. So
okay.
There's just a flood of ideas, and we're open to them, and it's just having the personnel to do it. That's the only thing.
Because he was an international guy, dude.
And so we'll be able to, we'll probably be able to interview Bill Clinton, Al Gore, Whoopi Goldberg. There's just a whole host of people that collect Dunbar.
That's going to get a lot of eyeballs, dude. That's going to get a lot of eyeballs, dude.
So we're excited about that. So
probably the bigger the star, the easier it is to raise the money, huh?
Yeah, It helps to have that circle around that person. People willing to give the money. That's
especially famous people that were nice people and giving people.
Yeah,
it's probably really easy in those cases.
Yeah, definitely. That's for sure.
Well, dude, man, listen. I really appreciate what you do, man. What you guys do is super important, man. Telling the story of these people. I can't wait to see what you guys have coming in the future. And everybody's got to go check it out, man. How can they find all of your stuff?
Well, you go to WLAE.com, or you can check out our YouTube channel. We're slowly starting to populate that with documentaries. So you can do that. And people can email me, jim@WLAE.com, if they have an idea or if there's something that they want to see.
Like a person that they think might be worthy of something, just to reach out to you and say, hey, what do you think about this person?
Exactly. It helps if you know where the money is, so that helps, but we can help you figure that out.
Okay.
Definitely. We're interested in hearing from people. And we're interested in feedback on our documentaries, so we'd like to know what people think. So when we do these things, we have the red carpet, the everything else.
No, it's like a movie premiere.
It's like a movie premiere, and at the end, they come up to the front and they address the crowd. And for me, that's just the magic moment at that point, because here's all the people that really love and admire this particular person, or what have you, and they are, getting to hear from them. And it is a great moment. In some cases, there's not a dry eye in the house, so we've had those moments. Wow. And those have been real special. So we're happy to be doing what we're doing. I appreciate you having me.
No, we appreciate you, my brother. Listen, like I said, man, these are iconic people, man, that you guys, if you don't tell their story, who's going to tell their story, dude?
That's what we like to say, too.
Yeah, it's like you're commemorating these people, man, and they'll live on. And hey, we need as many where our country seems to be going. Hey, man, getting back and telling the stories of our elders is a very important thing, man. I think we need to preserve it, dude.
That's right.
So I appreciate you, my brother.
Dude.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for having me, man.
Great. You got it.